What's good with y'all, man? Welcome back to another video. How y'all doing? Today I'm going to be finally talking about Spider-Man No Way Home. I know I've been talking about that I was going to do a review for the movie a while ago, but instead of doing a review video, I just want to talk about it. And this is going to be a full spoiler video, so if you don't like spoilers and you don't want the movie ruined for you, I apologize, but this is your warning. I'm going to wait another like 10 seconds. So if you haven't seen Spider-Man No Way Home, first off, what are you doing? It's possibly it's movie of the year probably. I say probably, but someone in the comments is gonna be like, "Oh no, it's not. It's totally not movie of the year." For me, it's movie of the year. Like, it's possibly comic book movie of. Okay, I'm not gonna say comic book movie of the decade, but it's in the conversation. But I'm gonna wait a couple more seconds. So for those that haven't seen it yet, go watch it. And all right, I'll give you guys a minute for a warning. But let's get into it. Spider-Man No Way Home was exactly what we needed. There were a lot of very funny moments. There was some of the best moments in a Spider-Man movie. I feel like they paid a lot of homage. They paid homage to both Tobey and Andrew Spider-Man. They redeemed Andrew Spider-Man, in my opinion. And I just want to say that for everyone that slandered Andrew Garfield Spider-Man and slandered the Amazing Spider-Man movies, y'all don't get to act like I don't want to say y'all can't act like, oh, he was great as Spider-Man the whole time. Stop it. Stop it. Andrew Garfield literally was probably was one of my favorite parts in the movie, honestly. What he did and what Tobey did for Tom Holland Spider-Man is one of the reasons why I believe he's where at the very end of the movie when you see him web swing when it's clearly around Christmas time in a blue and red and blue suit is because of them, because he is like, oh, I'm gonna pay homage to those guys in their suits. I do have a lot of theories I'm gonna get into at the end of the video for the future of Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Men, because there's two of them. But this movie, to put it in a general statement, this movie was action packed, had a lot of emotional moments, a lot of sad moments for a Spider-Man movie. There was a lot of sad moments, and there was comedy too. But it was like, let's just say, like, it didn't feel like overly funny. There were parts of it that were hilarious and like laugh out loud moments. Like, one of my favorite moments is when they address that Tobey has organic webbing. When he shoots the web, it comes out of his body instead of having web shooters. And Andrew's reaction is the best. He's like, yo! It was so funny because it was so organic. It was so natural. And Tom just like, he focused on it for like 3 minutes and then he just goes on with it. Andrew's focused on it for like 10 minutes damn near. And they do address how Tobey and Tom have dealt with cooler villains than Andrew, since Andrew was limited, since they only gave him 2 movies since the third one. Kevin Feige basically said, "Hey, we don't need to do an Amazing Spider-Man 3 because Marvel would like to make a deal of bringing Spider-Man into the MCU." So they basically kiboshed Amazing Spider-Man 2, like they kiboshed Amazing Spider-Man 2, Amazing Spider-Man 3, and it was like they kind of kiboshed Spider-Man 4. Thanks, Feige. No, seriously, love you, Kevin Feige. If you ever want to reach out, we could do a video or something. Just give me a call, man. Just give me a call. My business emails are in the about page of my channel. I doubt he's ever gonna see this, but the sad moments felt really real. When I predicted it months ago, I predicted this back, I would say, in October or September. And I said that someone is going to die in this movie, and I said I think it's going to be Aunt May. I said that among my friend group. I said that where I work. I said I think Aunt May is going to die. They're like, I don't know. Someone said, and I was right. And I was so mad at myself. I was like, why did I have to be right? But Aunt May, in my opinion, she redeemed herself for the last 2 movies because she felt like the aunt that was just that she was like that wasn't really that was around but wasn't completely around in the film. That she was just there to be like, oh, this is my hot aunt. Like, that's what it felt like. In this movie, she really became the Uncle Ben character teaching Tom Spider-Man that with great power comes great responsibility, and it was the first time it was ever uttered in the MCU. Because when Tony asked Peter in Civil War, he's like, "What makes you get out of that twin bed in the morning?" He says, when you have the powers that I do, and you don't do something, and something bad happens, that's on you." That was his reason for being Spider-Man. Now with great power comes great responsibility. And I was like, oh, I'm glad Iron Man didn't say it, but God, wrong quote. But that moment felt so real, and you really felt for these characters. And in my head, I was like, all right, you want it, because like the whole thing is that Tom doesn't want to send the villains back to their universe. The villains that I'm guessing that everyone has seen a trailer knows who the villains are in this movie. There's Lizard, there's Electro, who in my opinion was amazing. I loved Electro in this movie because Amazing Spider-Man 2, probably my second or third favorite Spider-Man movie outside of this one, and probably Far From Home because I really liked Far From Home as well. Maybe because I'm younger, and maybe like, oh my God, how dare you not have a Tobey movie? How dare you not like Spider-Man 2? I didn't grow up on Spider-Man 2. I grew up on The Amazing Spider-Man. That's why. But I really liked Electro's character. I really like how it's exactly what Jamie Foxx had said in the news. He says he's not really have a vendetta. He has a vendetta against Spider-Man, but his main vendetta is against society because he feels like a nobody. And you really see that in this movie. You really see that Jamie Foxx's Electro really just doesn't like society. He really has a thing against the world because he feels like without his abilities, without his powers, he is a nobody. And he isn't a nobody, to be honest. He's a genius. He worked at Oscorp. He made some of the greatest technology at Oscorp that they talked about in Amazing Spider-Man 2. You really see it, and then you just see him thrown aside because of how he looks and stuff like that. They even address how he looks too, which is hilarious. So like, you look way better. He's like, yeah, I like how I look here. He's not blue, so you can get rid of the Dr. Manhattan jokes. And yes, I talked a lot about Dr. Manhattan and Electro and in my last three Ultimate Spider-Man comic reactions, which you should check out. Link in the description below for the playlist of all the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. Check it out. All right. Next, the other villains, which were obvious, was Alfred Molina's Doc Ock. It was so good to see him, and they address where they pull these guys out of. They pull Electro right before he dies. They pull Kirk Connors, who also is in the movie. Sandman's also in the movie, and of course Norman Osborn, who was probably the second best part of the movie, was Norman Osborn, and he really he really fudged with Peter's mental, he really threw him through the ringer psychologically. But they sort of break down where they pull these guys out of, except for really Osborn. They pull Ock right before he and Peter sort of reconcile in the Spider-Man 2, before he's like, "Where's my machine?" is what he said. And if you remember, the machine had the power of the sun, which they say multiple times in this. Doc Ock's like, "It was the power of the sun," holding the arc reactor in his hand. "The power of the sun in the palm of my hand." He said something like that. I was like, oh my God, they milking this line. And I think they pull Kirk Connors before he is able to scale the Empire State Building. I think that's when he gets pulled in. Electro gets pulled in seconds before he dies. And he's like, "Oh, I was about to die." And Sandman was pulled way after. I think he got pulled way after Spider-Man 3, because he's like, "We get along, we're buddies." And when he first sees him, he's like, "Oh, you're not doing this to me." And what they really sort of change in the movie than what I originally thought in the trailer, which was really good of Marvel to do that. It was really good that they changed from, "You're not taking this away from me." I thought they were talking about their lives in the very beginning. In the trailers, you see Electro is like, "You're not going to take this away from me. You're not going to take away my living." But in the movie, they show the arc reactor is really overpowering Electro. It's boosting his powers. And he's like, "You're not taking this away from me." He's talking about the arc reactor. He's like, "You're not taking away this power. I like it here. You're not going to move me." And it really gets heavy in this movie. There are parts of this movie that get really heavy. When Aunt May dies, you instantly feel for Peter, because they play a perfect scene of J. Jonah on there's like a big screen, like a big ad thing, that they have in New York City. They have those all over the place. They even have a couple in LA, I believe. And you just see J. Jonah Jameson just really giving it to Spider-Man, saying it's your fault. You're the reason that this is happening. Just pray, folks. And Spider-Man, look what you've done. And you see Peter like has tears in his eyes. His eyes are red. He's really beaten up because this was right after Goblin turned from being good to being bad, and it was like a really heavy scene. And then they immediately saved that scene by bringing in Toby and Andrew. Zendaya and Jacob really were great supporting characters for Peter in this movie. Ned was funny. Ned had some really funny scenes, and he actually surprised myself and the people I went with the fact that he could use a little sling ring thing, that he could do that. He could also, the cape saved him, which was also a cool moment. So that's like, hey, maybe in the future Ned can become part of Camartage and these sorcerers over there. And Zendaya played amazing as Michelle in this. You can tell that her priorities weren't really going to college, and she even says it, that if you expect disappointment, then you won't get disappointed. She says that, and I was like, that's a way to look at it. And Peter even references that at, like, right before the final battle. It was like, what do you say? Expect disappointment, expect disappointment, and get disappointed. She's like, no, just go kick some ass, is what she says, because like she knows that like they can't fail. And they have a really emotional scene at the very end of the movie because, all right, like quick summary at the end of the movie is like, bunch of people. How it works is that those technical 7 people that were brought in, the two Spider-Man, the 5 villains, were brought in because they all knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, which doesn't really work because Electro never knew Peter's identity. I guess like Harry could have told him, but I doubt it. And what's really heavy is that Peter wants to cure them throughout the movie. He wants to save them, which is he doesn't have to do that. He even says it at one point. He's like, you guys can just go kill them at one point, because this is right when Aunt May dies. He is in his feelings. Like, he's really in his feelings. Like, you can tell. Like, it's an emotional scene. But what happens is Peter gets convinced, because Aunt May wanted them to be cured. He didn't want to just send them. She didn't want them to get sent to go die, and she wanted Peter to like have that be his responsibility. So they go through with it. The Toby, Andrew, and Tom all get their science nerd geek stuff on. They go into a lab. They start working on everything. For some reason, Toby just automatically remembers how to make an anti-goblin serum. Oh, I've been thinking about this for years. Evidence? And Andrew just recreates the antidote, even though Gwen Stacy does in the movie. They reference Gwen Stacy multiple times in this movie. Andrew references her when it's an emotional scene. He's like, she was my MJ. He references her in the laboratory when they were talking about relationships, he and Toby. Then there's a huge reference when Zendaya is somewhat seeming that she's fallen to her death, and Tom tries to like grab her like, I got you, and Glider just sends him away. He's like, no, and then Andrew's like, I'm not letting this happen again. He like tackles to jump. He like jumps to like hold on to her, and then he catches her, and then he asks, are you okay? And she's like, yeah. And then he starts tearing up. And if you're in the audience, you're applauding or you're crying in this scene. She's like, are you okay? He's like, I'm okay. I loved this movie, y'all. I'm probably gonna see it again. I've seen it already 4 times, but I'm seeing it again. This movie was incredible. And there's that one part where Andrew is really feeling down terrible. He's like, man, y'all fought aliens. I fought a guy in a rhino suit. And I was like, oh my god, they referenced that. Because they confirmed a couple, like, I would say a month ago, that Rhino wouldn't be in the movie. And it was very funny. It was very funny. It's like, man, I just always thought it was a Russian guy in a rhino suit. And then Toby says to him, hey, you're amazing. And I was like, oh my god. Because people have shitted on Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man for a long time, which is really messed up because he really liked being Spider-Man. And you're probably like, well, I'm sure Tom and Toby did too, but Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland was born to play the role. He's been a child actor for who knows how long. And he's just he's an athlete. He's a hell of an athlete. And Toby was the original, so you couldn't really give Andrew the limelight. Whereas people like me that in my younger generation, that sort of their introduction to Spider-Man was either through cartoons or through the Amazing Spider-Man, because that's how old we were. I was born in '02, so I didn't really get to experience Spider-Man 1. Was too young to see Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man 3 I really liked. No matter how people now think it's so good, back then people hated Spider-Man 3, and I was like, hey, I'm rocking with it. I like Spider-Man 3. It's cool. I like Amazing Spider-Man 2, even though all y'all hate that movie. I'm rocking with it. So for those that hated those movies, where are y'all now? Y'all on the good side now? Yeah, that's what I thought. And Andrew's like, thank you, and he's like, no, you are amazing. And I'm just thinking, that's literally the title of his movies. Come on now. And they even sort of reference that Toby is married to Mary Jane now, which is very cool to see. And I'm gonna get into more of their story later on, but the emotional parts of this movie really come at the end, because how it ends is Doctor Strange, everybody that knows who Peter Parker is is starting to float in. Like there's like cracks in the sky and everything, and Tom says, make another spell, but instead of everybody forgetting that I'm Spider-Man, have everybody, and he's like, was there another spell that could work? He's like, but everybody would forget who Peter Parker is. It's like it would be like if you never existed. He's like, I'll do it. And he really didn't listen to Zendaya in this movie. He didn't really listen to MJ at all in this movie, because she said, next time you want to make a multiversal type decision, try to let us know. He didn't. I mean, he did at the end, but he could have like talked to him about it first and then gone back to Strange. Strange's arc in this movie is kind of what I expected a little bit. I expected him not to be in it the whole time. I didn't expect him to fully do what Doctor Strange did, what Iron Man did. Being that he was a full-on mentor. He wasn't really that. He was sort of like the balance of he was like the adult in the room, and in the moments that they needed like some sense. What's a funny scene is when he finally gets back to the fight, when they've cured like 3 of the 4 villains, and Toby and Andrew just getting on Doctor Strange. Like he says to them, he's like, I was in the Grand Canyon for 12 hours. And he's like, and they're like, you were in the Grand Canyon? Like, he could have really used your help. I'm just like, yo, come on. What are we doing here, man? But what's really emotional about the end scene is that they sort of have a hug moment, which is really cool. The 3 Spider-Man have like a hug moment, and you can tell, because as the reports are coming out, this is not the last time we'll see Toby and Andrew in the MCU. How good this movie is doing, they would be fools to not make more. But what really gets emotional is when Ned and MJ learn from Peter that that they're going to completely forget who he is, and that includes Peter Parker, not just Spider-Man, Peter Parker. And what's really messed up about it is Ned and Peter were friends before he was Spider-Man, but MJ and Peter's relationship didn't really start until he was Spider-Man, and you're not only taking that away, you're taking away the identity of Peter Parker, and the ramifications of that is incredible. Shout out to Movie Flame, because in his timeline of Tom Holland Spider-Man, he really breaks it down how much this decision has really affected Peter. Because think about it, if they erase your identity, that erases all your medical records, all your school records. It basically it says, oh, you were born today, or you were discovered today, essentially. And there's a really emotional scene where Ned and Peter do a little handshake. They bring it in close, and you see Ned is crying, and Peter is getting emotional too. And Michelle is really getting emotional as well. She's like, they have a really embraced kissing moment, which it was the only kissing moment in the whole movie. Like, she kissed him on the cheek once, and besides that, that's not important, but it's just like, okay. And you can tell the chemistry with Tom Holland and Zendaya was a lot better in this movie. I guess you can point out, oh, they were in a relationship, that's why. It could be that. It could be that they were closer together, and probably because they were in a relationship together, because of COVID and how close they were together, that probably would improve. And right after like they're done kissing, Zendaya says to Tom, "I love you," and then he's about to say it back. She says, "No, you say it back when we get reintroduced, and when when we're back in a relationship together, that's when you say I love you. You say it first. That's essentially what she's trying to say to him. So what happens towards the end of the movie is everybody sort of forgets Peter Parker to the point where he doesn't even feel like the need to get back to high school. You see him moving into his shitty apartment, which is a great reference to the Raimi-verse, the Raimi Spider-Man. It's a good callback to that. I wonder if the owner of the apartment is gonna ask for that rent. They talk. I think he already did. He's like, rent's due at the end of the month. He says something like that. And you see just little Easter eggs in that one scene. You see the Emperor Palpatine that he puts it on like his desk or something, or on like a dresser or something. That's an Easter egg for when they first introduced Ned in Spider-Man: Homecoming. His first appearance in the MCU was Peter was in his locker, just grabbing something from his locker, and he's like, "Help me rebuild my Lego Death Star," and it's just Ned holding a little Emperor Palpatine. So that's a callback to Ned, and he's like, "I'm never forgetting Ned." And you see the coffee cup from from MJ's, where she works in to get coffee, and he just puts it on her desk, so that way he always remembers. But what sort of pissed me off when I first saw the movie was it felt like they're just leaving those characters behind. As I've seen it multiple times over, there are a lot of ways that they can reintroduce Peter to their lives. The first one is obviously her band-aid. She has like a band-aid like right here or right here on her face. And that's what makes Peter sort of not try to get back with them. He's like, oh, she's hurt and she doesn't even know why. Let's just keep it that way. I don't want to see them get hurt. I care about these people too much to do that. And the other thing, she's still wearing the necklace because the significance of that necklace is very important for their relationship, because Peter at the start of Spider-Man Far From Home, not No Way Home, at the start of Far From Home, he has a plan that he's going to buy that necklace for her because it's one of her favorite murder mysteries, I want to say murder mysteries, just one of her favorite murder stories, because Zendaya back in Far From Home was a really I want to say she was like more of an edgy sort of character, which was good for her character. It really suited what this character does. And what really sort of brings it full circle is when Peter sees a whip, and like what happens in the movie is it breaks because of the Mysterio situation, and Peter gives it to her, and she's like, "Oh no, I like it better broken," which really symbolizes their relationship. Is that it's not a normal relationship. He's a superhero, and she's this uber smart person. Well, it's not saying Peter isn't smart, but she's smarter than him for sure. Like Peter is really smart, but you can tell that she's like up there for sure. And what really sort of changes the dynamic of who they are together is that necklace. You can really tell that she really likes the necklace. And one of the ways Peter can reintroduce himself is he can ask her, "Hey, where'd you get the necklace?" She's like, "Oh, I don't know." He's like, "I got it for you. You forgot about me." He could do that. Like, sure, that seems kind of weird, but that's just one way they could do it. The other thing is he can just go into full detail about it. I really hope they pick up, like what they did with this movie is they picked up right after the second movie ended. I hope they can pick up the fourth movie right after the third movie ended, because some of these characters need to renew their characters. Some of these cast members need to renew their contracts, including Tom Holland. And I would really hate to see them just throw this universe away. I doubt that they're going to, but if they do, that's just a waste in my opinion, because this movie really this is a good movie, honestly. Like, this movie was really good. I'm not saying it's a 10 out of 10 but it's pretty damn close to it. But talking more about the Toby and Andrew, if they're planning to do Secret Wars, and if you don't know what Secret Wars is like a multiverse type event. It's like Crisis on Infinite Earths in the DC universe. It's kind of like that, but more like identity theft and that type of thing. And they sort of bring in multiple universes. That's how they could talk more about. That's how they could bring in more of Toby. And I heard that Andrew Garfield's party would really like to continue where they left off with Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is really good. It's really good that they do that. And I didn't really want to talk about it as much in this, but Toby just sort of felt like the mentor in the back in this movie. I'm not saying that he didn't have his moments, because he had his moments. He had a really good moment with Doc Ock, which really referenced Spider-Man 2. When he was first introduced to Dr. Octavius. He's like, "Peter Parker, I hear you're a great student, but you can be lazy." He's like, "Well, I'm working on it." And then then when they introduce her, he's like, "You've grown up. How are you doing to your boy?" He's like, "I'm working on it." He doesn't use that exact same quote, but he uses the same line that he used in Spider-Man 2. Now I'm finally going to address Green Goblin. Green Goblin ripped Spider-Man's heart out and put it back in and ripped it out again in this movie. He first was seen as a villain, and then he smushed his helmet, thinking, "Oh, that's how I'm going to destroy the Goblin side of me." Because they really do it as Norman Osborn has two multiple personalities. He has Norman Osborn, and he has the Green Goblin. Is what they basically make that out to be, which is a good way to explain it. He quotes himself by saying, "I'm somewhat of a scientist myself." He literally rehashes that quote with a different Spider-Man, which I thought was really cool. They're working on cures for Octavius together. He and Tom, and they're working on one for Electro. And then Peter's spider sense goes off. And I really like how they did his spider sense in this. They had it with Doctor Strange, and they did it with Green Goblin respectively. But what's really good about the scene is that he doesn't know where the danger's coming from, and he just hears like, heh. You hear Norman's laugh. You see him smiling, and then he convinces Electro to not take the cure. And those two break out, and then most of the villains break out. But Goblin and Spider-Man have a lot of hand-to-hand combat in this scene and in the movie alone. They did talk about how there's going to be more hand-to-hand combat, which I liked in this movie. And you could really tell the anger, how much Peter despises Goblin, hates him, wants him dead. You can really see it in this movie. And right before it all goes down, right before it all is about to end, Green Goblin is, in the scene when Peter's like, in Happy's apartment, I believe it's called, apartment condo place. They are fighting floor to floor to floor, and then they land on the bottom floor, and Goblin throws a pumpkin bomb right near Aunt May's head. Peter like jumps, no! It explodes, and Goblin kind of like how he died. That's what he does to Aunt May. He kind of sticks her with the glider, but then he flies off. Peter doesn't even know that Aunt May is dying. And until he sees the blood on his hand. She's like, "What is it?" And he's like, "You don't know, you don't." He realizes she doesn't know, so he wants her to stay calm and to enjoy this last moment. She talks, "I love you, Peter." They get the responsibility speech. She dies, and then the SWAT team is there, so he can't even grab her body to leave. He's like, "Get out now!" And then that emotional scene where J. Jonah Jameson is on the live screen, just doing that, and there's an emotional moment right after they introduce the two Spider-Mans. I know this talk is all over the place, but it's a talk video for a reason. It's not a review. You have Peter sitting on the roof of his high school. I like how Toby and Andrew talk about like where's he going? And then Toby's like, does he have like a special place where he can go? And then Andrew's like, should I just be alone and just leave the world behind? And Toby's like, yeah. He said, and then Toby's like, oh, the bridge was my spot. And then Andrew was like, Empire State, better view. He's like, you're right. That was a good scene. And then they're like, MJ's like, I know a place. And then they go there and they see just Peter just sitting like this. And then MJ and Ned start hugging Peter, and then he is bawling, and they're crying a little bit too. They're just trying to support him. And Zendaya's like, Peter, you have some people here to see you. And he's like, who is it? He's like not in the mood, and he's really not in the mood to talk to Toby and Andrew, who just hop down. Boing, boing. That's literally what they do. You could substitute boing for the sound effects that they do, because that's literally what they do. They go boing, 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 and then they both land in like the little Spider-Man pose. And then he's like, these guys are your villains. We can just send them back to your universe where you guys just end up killing them, right? And Toby just looks at Andrew. Andrew looks at Toby. He's like, and what's messed up is he's about to send everybody home, and Zendaya just looks at him and she's like, don't do it. And he's like, give it to me. And she's like, and then he looks back at them, and then they get the motivational speech going, where Andrew's like, I lost someone too. I lost Gwen. And right after she passed away, eventually came to terms with it, but I went down a dark path. A really dark path. I stopped pulling my punches, and for me, Andrew's Spider-Man when he first started wasn't really pulling any punches, really. That means he was actually killing people, which is very surprising for a Spider-Man movie. And then he's like, I stopped pulling my punches. I don't want you to go through that. And then Toby's like, I lost Uncle Ben. I found the killer and I killed him, but I didn't feel any different. I don't want you to go through that. They basically have like a, we don't want you to go through this dark time, but please. Please. And then they get their nerd on, they fight the villains, and then there's a final scene for Peter versus Norman. And this fight, okay, Tom versus Norman. This was very satisfying. It was very great hand-to-hand combat, and you could tell Tom was not pulling back any punches. He wanted Norman dead. Like, there's a moment where he jumps really high and like slams down, and if Norman was there, his body would have broken for sure. Some bones broken, probably a ribcage broken, but he moved like the last second. You just see a crate, like a really small crater in the ground with a fist just there, like a fist mark, like this mark just there in the ground. It was cool. And you see Zendaya, you see Jacob, you see Toby, you see Andrew just above, just watching him. They're like, oh my god, he's actually gonna kill him. And then Toby swings in the last second, and right as Tom is about to just run the glider through him, you see Toby's holding him. Peter's like, there's like, he's making noise like that. He's like, ah! And Toby's like, calm down, just relax. And then Norman, for some reason, cuts Toby. He's like, oh, damn it. And then Andrew, like like a quarterback, launches the cure. Tom catches it and just stabs it in his neck. I'm like, oh, that gotta hurt. But the end of this movie really sort of changes the perspective of how this goes. And I know I didn't really talk about Lizard or Sandman, and not a lot about Octopus, because right when Octopus was cured, he was the wholesome guy that he was before. He was really wholesome. But Sandman, they didn't really go into his character that much. It just sort of explains, like, oh, I want to get back for my daughter. Lizard's like, I'm here. Lizard would just existed in this movie, honestly. And I think they actually rehashed old clips. Because I don't think they actually got the actors to do it. I think they rehashed old clips. Because right when Sandman became Sandman Spider-Man 3, you see him looking at his hand, and then it goes, they sort of reversed it. So it goes, he's like, there's that. And Connor's just like that. So for the line that all these guys died because they know Peter Parker's Spider-Man, that is not true. They just all know he's Peter Parker. Only like 3 of them die. Other characters that could have been brought in this movie, there could have been Venom was in this movie. Tom Hardy Venom was in this movie, but Walter Grace, I think his name was, and that was the worst version of Venom. Okay, I liked it when I was a kid, but after I've seen Venom, like how he's supposed to look, dude was skinny Venom. He was essentially Peter with the black suit on, but just replicated into someone else's body, because dude was skinny. Venom isn't skinny, he built, you know what I'm saying? He built, you know what I mean? He's not supposed to look like a twig. He looked like a twig in Spider-Man 3. They also could have brought in, that's pretty much all who they could have brought in from the movies. They could have brought some people from like TV shows and stuff like that, but I doubt that they had the budget for that. Not even the budget, they had the time for that, because they made this during a COVID year, mind you. So shout out to them for that, because Tom even talked about it, and I think he talked about it in some interviews, like what it was like to like film during COVID, how everybody was wearing masks all the time and made things not as easy. Now for sort of the Easter eggs that were in this movie, right when you see the cracks, you can see Scorpion, the Rhino, and I don't mean the metal one, I mean the actual Rhino from the comics. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. I mean like this dude. Look at that. Come on now, look at that. That is literally perfect. This is literally what Rhino looks like. That's how he looked like in the movie, in case you didn't know. And There also was Craven, which I was a very big fan of. Hopefully they can introduce him in the next trilogy. And you can tell that they reference a lot of different Marvel properties in this, and a lot of Sony properties. They have like a couple PS5 ads. Everybody had like a Sony product that they were using. I think in they even had like a PS4 where Tom was staying. But let's get into the next trilogy and what I could see happening. What I could see happening is that, first things first, the Easter eggs at the very end of the movie with Venom's post-credit scene were very let's just say, you could tell they didn't really want Venom in this movie because they have plans for that character. They just left a little bit of goo. Like literally, if you took this much off Venom, if you took this much off Venom, this little speck thing, that's literally what was left behind when he was transferred back to his universe. Now I can see them going back and bringing Venom back for Spider-Man 4. I could see a Spider-Man versus Venom movie going on. I can see that. Another character they can bring in, they've fully introduced Kingpin into the Marvel Universe from what I've heard. From what I think we've seen Kingpin in the Hawkeye TV show, so you could bring in Kingpin. Scorpion is still around in this universe, so you could bring in Scorpion. They've already done a Goblin arc, so I'd be very surprised if they brought a Goblin arc. I'd be very surprised. But if they did, I wouldn't be surprised. Now for the Zendaya and Jacob characters, I could fully see them not bringing them back. I could see them not bringing them back and sort of exploring some more Peter's characters that Peter goes out with in the comics. I could see them bringing in not Mary Jane Watson. I could see them bringing in Gwen Stacy, Liz Allen, Carly Cooper for love interests. They could bring in Harry Osborn. They could bring in Eddie Brock if they wanted to, just as friends characters for Spider-Man. But if you bring in Eddie Brock, that's how they could do Venom. Is that how they could introduce that? And when it comes to the mentor thing, I don't see that continuing because they don't really need. He doesn't need a mentor anymore because he's learned what it means to be Spider-Man. This movie really showed him becoming Spider-Man. Like the first two, he sort of needed a mentor. He needed somebody helping him out. The fact that how little Strange was in this movie shows. Like Mysterio and Nick Fury were more the mentors in Far From Home, and Iron Man was obviously the mentor in Homecoming. So I don't really think like appearances would be cool. I definitely agree with that. But do I think that they need to bring another mentor character for this movie? No, I really don't, because again, this movie was really good and it really showed that Peter can do it on his own now, which is awesome. But when it comes to the next couple movies, what I could see is if they do want to do a Green Goblin arc, they could start it in the second movie and then finish it in the third movie. Because if they do introduce Harry Osborn, you can't have Harry Osborn without Norman. Or they could just do the whole Harry Osborn is the Green Goblin like they did in Spectacular Spider-Man, and then they sort of flipped it at the end and made it all about Norman. I do want to say that this movie was really good. I absolutely recommend you to see it, but again, if you don't see the prior Spider-Man movies and you see this in the theater and everybody's like, whoa, like super excited, and you're like, huh? Like, what's going on? Like, that's how it's going to turn out for you, because if you don't know what's going on, you're walking in blind for this Spider-Man movie of all Spider-Man movies, oh, you're screwed. I'm sorry, you're screwed. You're screwed. But, I honestly would give this movie like 9.5 out of 10, and maybe it sounds extremely biased because I'm wearing the Marvel chain, talking about Spider-Man, having done an Ultimate Spider-Man comic book reaction, a couple episodes of that. But I do think that this movie did what they needed to do when it came down to Spider-Man in general. Do I think that this movie is perfect? No. There are a couple moments where it felt like sometimes it felt like sometimes it just felt like, was that necessary? Did you need to include that? There were moments like that, but there were also moments that were really emotional that they could have simmered that down a little bit. They could have simmered down the action a little bit. They could have had more one-on-one scenes. I feel like they even hint at like a lot. They really poke fun at Doc Ock in this, which I thought was needed, because these people don't know who he is, and his name is Dr. Otto Octavius. They laugh at that. And May makes a, do you want tap water or salt? Because you're an octopus. That was bad. People laughed in the theater, and I was in. I was in the theater that I was in, because when I first saw it, I saw it in the theater. Since then, I've seen it in multiple theaters. But when I first saw it, it was very. You could tell that the people that were in it were super fans, along with myself. Because when that scene came, there was this dude that was busting a gut in the back. He was laughing hella hard, and I looked back. I was like, "You okay?" So with this next trilogy, I expect a Spider-Man versus Venom, because you don't leave a tiny little bit of a symbiote without saying, "Oh yeah." You get to it. Mind you, that was in Mexico, and I doubt Peter's gonna go to Mexico anytime soon. I appreciate y'all for those that watch this review. If this video goes well, and you guys want me to do more reviews, I could do more reviews for DC movies, for Marvel movies. I could do that, because that's what I know. Once again, I appreciate you guys watching this video. If you click right here is the playlist for the Ultimate Spider-Man reactions I've done. And click right here. Here's the subscribe button. It doesn't take any time at all for you to subscribe. We really appreciate it, and it's free. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace out.